Choosing the right GPU is never an easy task, especially when there are multiple options that offer similar performances. And, to help you make an informed decision, we have compared two such devices, being the RTX 3070 and the RTX 2080 Ti, to highlight both their pros and cons. So, let's get right into it. Starting off with performance, the RTX 3070 offers a 45% higher effective speed than its last generation RTX 2070 at the same MSRP. This GPU has 5,888 CUDA cores spread across 46 streaming multiprocessors, based on the same NVIDIA Ampere architecture as the RTX 3080 and RTX 3090. And, as with those cards, there are a ton of improvements both to raw performance and to power efficiency here that drive this mid-range graphics card to performance levels matched only by the very best graphics card of the last generation. The biggest generation-on-generation improvement from Turing to Ampere is that both data paths on the streaming multiprocessor now support FP32 workloads, which sees an effective doubling of CUDA cores per SM. While the RTX 3070 only boosts its SM count up by 27%, it more than doubles the CUDA core count, which massively boosts raw rasterization performance. Moving on to the RTX 2080 Ti, it was released alongside the RTX 2080, following on from the Pascal architecture of the 1080 series. However, the 2080 series graphics cards are based on a Turing GPU architecture which features tensor cores for AI, thereby potentially reducing GPU usage during machine learning workloads, and RT cores for ray tracing, rendering more realistic images. Unfortunately, there aren't many games that make use of these capabilities, so the price tag on the RTX 2080 Ti is difficult to justify. The 2080 Ti also features Turing NVENC, which is far more efficient than CPU encoding and alleviates the need for casual streamers to use a dedicated stream PC. On paper, the 2080 Ti has 4,352 CUDA cores, a base boost clock of 1350 at 1545 MHz, 11 GB of GDDR6 memory, and a memory bandwidth of 616 GB per second. The upshot is that it has around a 30% faster effective speed than the 1080 Ti, which offers comparable value for money and currently dominates the high-end gaming market. Professional users such as game developers or 4K gamers may find value in the 2080 Ti, but for typical 1080p gamers, prices still need to drop substantially before the card has much chance of widespread adoption. But, as GPU prices continue to drop month on month, that chance is becoming much more realistic. Okay, so now that we have given you a brief overview of both cards, let's talk about how they compare head-to-head. When it comes to VRAM, unlike its RTX Ampere 3080 and 3090 counterparts, the RTX 3070 does not make use of GDDR6X, so it does have the same GDDR6 found in the RTX 2080 Ti, but much less of it. The RTX 3070 comes with 8GB of RAM with a 14GB per second memory speed, a 256-bit interface, and a 448GB per second bandwidth. The RTX 2080 Ti, on the other hand, has 11GB of GDDR6 VRAM at a 14GB per second, a 352-bit memory interface, and 616GB per second bandwidth. The RTX 2080 Ti does have a clear advantage over the RTX 3070 in this department, but when it comes strictly to gaming, the memory will not play that much of a role, especially at lower resolutions. VRAM is mainly used to store textures and 3D objects at a distance, and not having enough VRAM will mean that textures may appear late or not load properly. However, if the memory cap isn't hit, then no difference will be felt. 8GB of VRAM, for most, if not all, gaming applications, is more than enough to handle the task. The only exception here is that some AAA titles are slowly reaching the 10GB VRAM cap at the 4K resolution, and as the new generation of games releases, the 4K VRAM requirements may also see an analogous increase. When advertising the generational leap between the 20 and the 30 series of GPUs, NVIDIA released a graph where the x-axis is price and the y-axis is relative performance, and they plot a variety of their GPUs. In this graph, the RTX 3070 appears as slightly faster than the RTX 2080 Ti, and the render configuration does show a small advantage. The RTX 2080 Ti has 4,352 CUDA cores, which are configured separately from its INT32 cores, which are also 4,352 in number. On the other hand, the RTX 3070 has 5,888 cores, but half of these are dedicated CUDA cores, while the other half can operate both as FP32 and INT32 cores. Therefore, the RTX 3070 may have a larger total CUDA core count, but if both INT32 and FP32 cores are needed in a gaming application or otherwise, then the RTX 2080 Ti has a larger total number of cores to work with. That being said, the cores of the RTX 3070 are of better quality as they operate at higher clock speeds. In terms of texture map units, the RTX 3070 trails slightly, with 180 184 TMUS versus the 272 TMUS of the 2080 Ti. It does have more render output units though, that being 96 versus 88. In regards to other computational power, the RTX 2080 Ti has far more tensor and ray tracing cores, but the quality of these cores is far lesser than the quality of the equivalent RTX 3070 cores. The RTX 2080 Ti has 544 first-generation tensor cores and 68 first-generation RT cores. The RTX 3070 has 184 third-generation tensor cores and 45 second-generation RT cores. If what NVIDIA advertises for their new generation tensor and ray tracing cores is true, then the tensor cores offer 2.7 times better high-performance computing, while the RT cores offer 1.7 times more RTT flops each. This means that even with the lesser number of cores, the RTX 3070 will have the equivalent of 78 RT cores and 497 tensor cores versus the 68 RT cores and 544 tensor cores of the RTX 2080 Ti. The clock speeds of the RTX 3070 range between 1500 MHz base and 1725 MHz boost, whereas the RTX 2080 Ti has a base clock speed of 1350 MHz and a boost clock speed of 1545. Both GPUs have the same memory clock speed of 14 GB per second, though the economic aspect is a much easier argument to be made in favor of the RTX 3070 since it retails for less than half the price of the RTX 2080 Ti. There is still a chance that one can find these two GPUs selling for around the same price. In terms of thermal design power, the RTX 2080 Ti draws 250 W of power from two 8-pin connectors, while the RTX 3070 draws 220 W of power from a 12-pin connector, so the RTX 3070 does appear to have a better power design to performance ratio, but only slightly. Considering all specifications, we see that both these graphics cards have their advantages and disadvantages, so a clear winner cannot be declared, at least not yet. The RTX 2080 Ti has more and better VRAM, more total number of cores, though they are less versatile and slower in clock speeds, more tensor cores, and better FP64 performance. On the other hand, the RTX 3070 is built on a new Samsung processing node. It has a new generation tensor and RT cores, the latter being more in number as well, and is more energy efficient. If we were to guess which would perform better, we would bet that the RTX 3070 would fare slightly better, or about even, at 1080p and 1440p resolutions and will trail slightly in 4K resolutions. If you can find a used RTX 2080 Ti for a reasonable price and are wondering which of the two GPUs to go for, then it must be said that the answer really does depend on how you prefer to game. If you want to game on a 4K monitor, the RTX 2080 Ti is a much safer bet, as it has enough VRAM to be able to play AAA games for now, and most likely for several years to come. In contrast, the RTX 3070 may be capped at lesser resolutions or in-game quality settings later down the road. If you prefer to game at 1080p or 1440p, at frame rates higher than 60 frames per second, then the RTX 3070 is the better choice. Also, since any VRAM trouble at 4K can be fixed by lowering the game quality settings, it may even just be the better GPU overall. Eventually, it all boils down to the availability and the current price these GPUs are selling for, as they are both seen selling for the same price online. So, what do you think about these GPUs? I'm sure we have but whetted your appetite for GPUs, or maybe just new technology in general. If so, be sure to check out our channel for the latest news and happenings in the world of tech. And don't forget to share your favorite with us. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.